believes in indefinite growth on a physically finite planet is either mad or an economist.
We don't want to focus politics on a notion that involves the rejection of principles around which a large majority of our fellow citizens organize their lives.
We are not as endlessly manipulable and as predictable as you would think.
I'm going to talk today about unconscious behavior. So first let me define what it is. By unconscious behavior, I mean behavior that's automatic and occurs with a lack of awareness, conscious will, willpower, intention. So as a result of these effects, we don't really understand what's influencing us, and we often can't avoid the behavior because we don't really know where it's coming from. But I want to stress that I'm not talking about the Freudian unconscious. And the Freudian unconscious was very emotional-based, and it was hidden from us for motivational reasons. But the new unconscious that neuroscientists and psychologists talk about is not accessible to our conscious mind because of where it happens in the brain, because it happens in parts of the brain that are not accessible. So it's by the architecture of the brain that they're unconscious. They're not hidden from us for motivational reasons, and they can't be revealed by introspection, by therapy, by talking. But the point really is that the same unconscious processes that we developed as our species was evolving that help us navigate very easily the physical world by being able to process sights and sounds instantaneously and to understand what's going on and what's around us. Similar processes happen in our social unconscious. We have an unconscious that processes social information in an analogous way that enables us to interact with each other in a very smooth and instantaneous manner. And this is something that's very important because the human species is really, in its essence, a social species. We probably couldn't have survived as a species without our social interactions, without banding together in groups. And also, we're a very violent species, so it was very important to these groups to know who your friends, who your enemies are, and as in all primates, what the hierarchy is within the group. And so we all have ways of not only recognizing and identifying other humans, but also of knowing what they think, and knowing what they think about us, knowing what they think we're thinking, and so forth. And I want you to come away with a couple main points. One is that our perceptions, our visual and auditory perceptions, our memories also, and our social judgments and perceptions are all constructed by our mind and largely influenced by our unconscious mind. And they're not direct, literal reflections of what's really out in the world, but they're rather a construction of our mind that we believe is real and seems real to us. And some of the things that our unconscious mind uses, in addition to the physical data that's out there, for instance, the data of what someone really says, or how a scene really looks, the light coming from the scene. In addition to that actual literal data, our mind uses things like our prior knowledge, our beliefs, our desires, the context, and many other things to feed into our conscious mind and form our perception. And that's the root of some of the illusions, optical and cognitive illusions that I'll talk about. This is what you perceive if you look at a road, right, or anywhere you see a clear picture. This is the picture that you think is real, but let me show you the data that a physicist would say is actually hitting your retina. So I'm going to show you a picture now that was made to reflect the actual data that hits your retina. And that looks like this, except for that yellow area in the center, which is there to indicate where the person was looking. So if you were to really perceive the world around you without your unconscious processing, you'd have a very fuzzy picture. But instead, without your thinking about it, without any effort, your brain puts it together and you feel that what you see is really what's there. Let me illustrate this. I want to illustrate 3 points here. One is that you're not going to have any control and that your mind does this automatically and that it is using context to make this picture. So what you see here is a picture of a checkerboard, and you see two rectangles, one labeled A and one labeled B. And they probably, as you look at that, you can see that B is a white square and A is a black square, and B looks to be lighter than A. Okay? But in reality, I'm telling you now, and trust me, but I'm telling your conscious minds that A and B are exactly the same. Okay? You can't really see them as being the same because your mind is taking the context of the picture and making them look different. And again, this is a good thing, because imagine if you had all of just the physical data coming to your brain like some computer, and you had to consciously sit down and do the calculation and figure out that it's a checkerboard. That would be really tough and take a long time. Instead, you automatically see it this way. One area of our brain, because we're such social species, is specialized for faces. So you probably recognize this fellow, Barack Obama. And the pictures, although he's upside down, probably look relatively normal to you. Now, since our brains are specialized to recognize faces because faces are so socially important, I want to illustrate the extra special processing your brain does by flipping this picture over, and you'll see that the faces aren't really that similar at all, and one is grotesquely deformed. But since your brain is not used to seeing people upside down, this only kicks in when I turn them over. So now you can see that your brain is helping you and saying, this Barack Obama on your right is very deformed, but if I flip him back, he's not. So this is something your brain is automatically doing, but it's not doing it for you for upside-down people because that hasn't been evolutionary favored for us. So let me go on in the remainder of the talk to social perception. So as in vision and hearing, we need sometimes to make quick assessments in our social world, and our unconscious mind also constructs a social perception of the world around us. This is about how your mind fills in pictures of people based not only on the data that you have of the people, but on other things, such as people's appearance. That inspired a professor at Princeton, a psychologist, to see if that really works in the real world. And so he took pairs of headshots of dozens of candidates before the 2006 elections for governorships and for Senate. And he showed people brief pictures of these pairs of candidates, didn't tell them what they were looking at, and just asked them to vote for whoever looked more competent. And if they recognized any of them, not to vote. And then he gathered the data on who looked more competent, and he predicted the results of the 2006 elections based solely on the appearance. No political polls, no political science, just on appearance. And the question is, if appearance really matters, he should have been fairly good at this, and if it doesn't matter, he should have been 50-50. And what was his result? He got 70% of the races correct. So that is a stark illustration of what the effect is of candidates' looks. Touch is another of these unconscious effects that affect us very much in our social interactions that we don't realize. These are pictures of 4 different species of primates, and all except for the ones in the center there, they spend a lot of time, an hour or 2 every day, grooming and touching each other. And the reason is that touch is used among primates to help create bonds and trust and to form social alliances. And we even have specialized nerves that are concentrated in our face and our forearms that are designed specifically to transmit the pleasure of social touch, and they're not really very useful for telling what's touching you or even exactly when. And so the question is, how much does touch influence you, just as looks influence you, and many other things in your environment influence you that I won't have time to talk about. And I'm going to talk about one experiment here, which was done in France. They got some handsome French guys, and they had them stand on a street corner all weekend propositioning single young women who walked by. It's a good job. And to half the women, they gave them a light touch on the elbow or the shoulder, less than half a second, as they all read the same text. This is the translation of the text. They gave their name and asked for the woman's phone number. And the question was, when they did this, how much would it increase their success if they included the touch versus just saying what they were going to say? And the answer is it doubled their success rate. So they got 20% phone numbers with the touch, 10% without. Not a grope, just a little light touch. Now this is, of course, asking for a date is sexually related, and so you might think that this doesn't apply in other realms, and I'll give you just a little bit of data because this was done also in many other realms. One of them was in restaurants. If they asked waiters and waitresses to give a little touch to their customers, and then they computed or they took data on the tips that the waiters and waitresses got, and they found that it increased their tips from an average of 14.5% to 17% with the touch. And when they were recommending specials, and they did the same thing, it increased their number of people who took the special from 40 to 60%. So touch and looks are 2 very important things that your unconscious mind is taking into account to take the context of your social perception. And I'm going to end just by showing you how it also works for you, because these are all studies on other people, and it's always more dramatic to do a study of you. So I asked you both, how much did you expect to pay for this hotel room? And group 1, your average was about 800 pounds. Now, usually I get from group 2 a little, and the reason is their average was 160 pounds. You guys were asked first, does this cost more than 3,500 pounds? And group 2 was asked, does it cost more than 35 pounds? And that little, you probably think, what an absurd question. This room is not 3,500 pounds, and it's certainly more than 35 pounds. But even this throwaway question that your conscious mind dismisses as being absurd had a great effect on what your guess was. Carl Jung said, these subliminal aspects of everything that happened to us may seem to play very little part in our daily lives, but they are the almost invisible roots of our conscious thoughts. Thank you.